The sandals made a soft, slapping sound against the concrete as Petty Officer First Class Larkin Bridger walked across the sprawling naval base. The morning sun already burned hot across the tarmac, and he carried a clipboard under one arm while balancing a lukewarm coffee in his other hand. His cargo shorts were regulation Navy issue, but the faded T-shirt and well-worn sandals gave him the appearance of someone who had just rolled out of bed rather than a sailor with nearly a decade of service. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've witnessed someone surprise everyone with unexpected skills where you're from. The supply warehouse loomed ahead, a massive structure of corrugated metal that radiated heat even in the early hours. Larkin had been assigned to logistics 3 years ago, a posting that most would consider career purgatory. While his peers competed for positions on ships or sought advancement through specialized training, he had quietly accepted the warehouse detail without complaint. The work suited him in ways that others could not understand. Inside the warehouse, Chief Petty Officer Hollis Thorne stood among rows of metal shelving that stretched toward the ceiling. The chief was a burly man with a perpetual scowl and a reputation for running the tightest supply operation on the base. He glanced up as Larkin entered, his expression softening slightly. "Morning, Bridger," Thorne said. "We got a rush order from the Admiral's office. Some kind of demonstration happening this week. They need equipment for a long-range shooting setup." Larkin nodded and set his coffee down on a nearby crate. "What kind of range are we talking about?" he asked. Thorne consulted his own clipboard, squinting at the handwriting. "Says here they need spotting scopes, wind meters, and target frames for distances exceeding 1 mile. Something about impressing foreign military observers. Typical brass nonsense, if you ask me." The words hung in the air for a moment. Larkin felt something stir in his chest, a familiar sensation he had worked hard to suppress over the years. 1 mile shooting was serious business, the kind of precision work that separated amateurs from true experts. He had not thought about that world in a long time. "When do they need it?" Larkin asked, keeping his voice neutral. "Tomorrow morning. Range 6. You know, the one out past the old airstrip." Thorne shook his head. "Apparently the Admiral wants to show off for some delegation from Eastern Europe. Wants to demonstrate American marksmanship superiority or some such propaganda." Larkin picked up his clipboard and began marking down the inventory numbers. His movements were efficient and practiced, the result of 3 years spent memorizing every item in the warehouse. He knew where everything was stored, from the smallest bolt to the heaviest equipment crate. The other sailors joked that he had the entire warehouse mapped in his head, and they were not wrong. "I will have everything ready by 0600, Larkin said. "Anything else, Chief?" Thorne waved him off. "Just make sure those scopes are calibrated. Last thing we need is equipment failure in front of form brass. Bad enough our guys have to perform under that kind of pressure." As Thorne walked away, Larkin stood alone among the towering shelves. His mind drifted back to another time, another range where he had stood in very different circumstances. His father's voice echoed in his memory, calm and instructional, teaching him to read the wind and calculate distances that seemed impossible. Those skills belonged to a different version of himself, one he had deliberately left behind when he joined the Navy. The rest of the morning passed in routine tasks. Larkin loaded equipment onto a flatbed truck, double-checked inventory sheets, and coordinated with other departments. He moved through the work with quiet competence, never drawing attention to himself, never volunteering opinions or seeking recognition. It was a careful balance he had maintained for years, and it served him well in the anonymous world of military logistics. By late morning, word had spread through the base about the upcoming demonstration. Larkin overheard conversations in the warehouse, at the mess hall, and along the pathways between buildings. Everyone seemed to have an opinion about who would be selected as the shooter. Names of elite snipers circulated like currency. SEAL team members were mentioned with reverence. Marine Corps marksmen were discussed with knowing nods. No one mentioned the quiet logistics officer who wore sandals and spent his days counting supplies. The Admiral's conference room occupied the top floor of the headquarters building, with windows overlooking the entire base. Rear Admiral Thaddeus Cortlandt stood at the head of a long table, his uniform crisp despite the oppressive heat. Around him sat the senior staff, their faces reflecting varying degrees of concern about the situation at hand. "Gentlemen, we have a problem," Admiral Cortlandt said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "The delegation from Eastern Europe arrives in 48 hours. They specifically requested a demonstration of long-range precision shooting capabilities. This is not just about showing off. This is about maintaining strategic relationships and demonstrating our technical superiority." Master Chief Boone Kellerman, the range master, cleared his throat. "Sir, we have several qualified personnel. Senior Chief Wade Garrison from SEAL Team 3 has extensive sniper experience. Gunnery Sergeant Knox Rafferty from the Marine Detachment holds multiple marksmanship awards. I can have either one ready for the demonstration." Admiral Cortlandt walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "What distance are we talking about?" he asked. Kellerman consulted his notes. "The delegation specifically requested a demonstration at 1,500 meters, sir. 1.5 miles. They want to see if our shooters can match or exceed their own capabilities. Apparently, their best marksman recently achieved a confirmed hit at 1,400 meters, and they want to see what we can do." The room fell silent. 1,500 meters was an extreme distance, the kind of shot that required not just skill but perfect conditions and equipment. Even among elite military shooters, such distances pushed the boundaries of what was possible. "Can our people make that shot?" the Admiral asked. Kellerman hesitated before answering. "Under ideal conditions, with the right equipment and preparation, yes, sir, but is not guaranteed. Wind at that distance, temperature variations, even the curvature of the Earth becomes a factor. We're talking about a bullet drop of several hundred feet and flight time of multiple seconds. Then make sure conditions are as ideal as possible," Admiral Cortlandt said. "I want our best shooter, our best equipment, and our best weather window. This demonstration cannot fail. Do you understand, Master Chief?" "Yes, sir. I will coordinate with Senior Chief Garrison and Gunnery Sergeant Rafferty. We will run practice sessions starting tomorrow morning." As the meeting concluded, the officers dispersed to their various duties. The base began preparing for the high-stakes demonstration with military efficiency. Equipment was inspected and tested. The range was measured and marked. Weather forecasts were studied with intense focus. Everyone understood that failure would reflect poorly not just on the individuals involved, but on the entire command structure. Meanwhile, Larkin continued his work in the warehouse, unaware of the specific details being discussed in the conference room. He loaded the requested equipment onto the truck with careful attention, checking each item against his list. The spotting scopes were high-end models, capable of resolving details at extreme distances. The wind meters were digital units with precision sensors. The target frames were reinforced steel, designed to withstand repeated impacts. Chief Thorne appeared as Larkin secured the last of the equipment. "You know anything about long-range shooting, Bridger?" he asked casually. "A little," Larkin replied, keeping his tone neutral. "Enough to know it is difficult." Thorne grunted. "Difficult does not begin to cover it. I heard they are attempting 1,500 meters. That is not shooting, that is mathematics and luck combined. Even our best guys will struggle with that distance." Larkin said nothing, but his mind was already working through the calculations. 1,500 meters in the heat meant significant mirage effects. The wind would be unpredictable across that distance, with multiple layers at different altitudes potentially affecting the bullet's flight path. Coriolis effect would push the round slightly, and the drop would require extreme elevation adjustment. It was a shot that demanded absolute precision in every variable. "You delivering this gear tomorrow morning?" Thorne asked. 0600, as requested, Larkin confirmed. "Good. Try to stay out of the way when the big shots show up. Admiral's going to have half the base brass out there watching. Last thing we need is logistics personnel cluttering up the range." Larkin nodded his understanding. He had no intention of drawing attention to himself. The skills he possessed were meant to stay buried, hidden beneath the mundane duties of warehouse management and inventory control. His father had taught him that true mastery required no audience, no recognition, no need for external validation. The shot was everything. The rest was just noise. That evening, as the sun set over the base, Larkin sat alone in his quarters. A small room with basic furnishings, walls bare except for a single photograph. The image showed a younger version of himself standing beside an older man, both holding rifles on a competition range. His father's smile was proud, his arm around Larkin's shoulders. The trophy between them bore an inscription for first place in the National Long Range Championship, Amateur Division. That had been 8 years ago, a lifetime in many ways. Larkin studied the photograph in the fading light, remembering the feel of the rifle, the perfect stillness before the shot, the satisfaction of watching the spotter confirm impact at distances that seemed impossible. He had walked away from that world to serve his country in a different capacity, believing that his skills would be better used in support roles rather than combat positions. Now, as the base prepared for its demonstration, he wondered if that decision had been correct. The morning air carried a slight breeze when Larkin arrived at Range 6 with the equipment truck. The sun had barely cleared the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The range stretched out before him, a vast expanse of desert terrain that extended far beyond normal training distances. At the far end, barely visible even with binoculars, stood the target frames he would help set up. Master Chief Kellerman was already there, coordinating with a team of range technicians. He glanced at Larkin and gestured toward the equipment truck. "Get that gear unloaded and staged near the firing line," he ordered. "We have shooters arriving in 30 minutes, and I want everything ready." Larkin worked efficiently, moving the heavy cases with practiced ease. The spotting scopes went on tripods at the firing line, positioned to give observers clear views downrange. Wind meters were placed at intervals to measure conditions at different points. The target frames, already positioned at the 1,500-meter mark, needed only final adjustments to ensure they were properly secured. As he worked, vehicles began arriving. First came Senior Chief Wade Garrison with 2 other SEAL team members. Garrison was a lean man with sun-weathered skin and the confident bearing of someone who had operated in the world's most dangerous places. He carried his own rifle case, a custom weapon that had accompanied him through multiple deployments. "Morning, Master Chief," Garrison said to Kellerman. "Weather looks good for a first attempt." "Wind is light right now," Kellerman agreed, "but it will pick up as the day heats. You want to take your shots in the next 2 hours if possible." Gunnery Sergeant Knox Rafferty arrived minutes later, accompanied by 2 Marine spotters. Rafferty was built like a linebacker, but moved with surprising grace. His rifle case bore the scars of hard use, and his eyes constantly scanned the environment with the alertness of a trained observer. Larkin finished setting up the equipment and moved to the side, becoming part of the background. He watched as both shooters unpacked their weapons with ritualistic care. Each rifle represented thousands of dollars of precision engineering. Custom barrels, match-grade triggers, advanced optics capable of resolving details at extreme distances. These were not standard military-issue weapons, but personal instruments refined through years of use. Senior Chief Garrison took the first position. His spotter settled beside him with a high-powered scope, calling out wind conditions and distance confirmations. The SEAL worked through his pre-shot routine with methodical precision, adjusting the scope elevation, checking the rifle's level, settling into a stable prone position. Everyone at the firing line fell silent, respecting the concentration required. "Wind is 3 to 5 miles per hour from the left," the spotter said quietly. "Mirage is minimal. Target is clear." Garrison's breathing slowed, his body becoming absolutely still. The moment stretched, time seeming to pause. Then the rifle cracked, the sound sharp and authoritative. All eyes turned to the spotters watching the distant target through powerful optics. "Miss," one of the observers called out. "Approximately 2 feet low and 1 foot right." Garrison made adjustments and fired again. The second shot was closer, but still failed to connect with the target. He fired 3 more times, each round guided by careful calculations and spotter corrections. The closest came within 6 inches of center, a respectable result at such extreme distance, but not the definitive hit the Admiral wanted. After Garrison completed his attempts, Gunnery Sergeant Rafferty took position. The Marine's approach was different, more aggressive in his body positioning and faster in his shot timing. His first round impacted high and left. Corrections brought subsequent shots closer, but like Garrison, he could not achieve a center hit. The best any of them managed was near misses that would be respectable under normal circumstances, but inadequate for the demonstration. Larkin watched from his position near the equipment truck. His trained eye saw the small errors, the minor miscalculations that added up at such extreme distance. Garrison was reading the wind at the firing line, but not accounting for the shifts that occurred downrange. Rafferty was compensating correctly for wind, but his elevation was slightly off, likely due to temperature effects on the ammunition. These were subtle mistakes that only someone with extensive long-range experience would recognize. Master Chief Kellerman consulted with both shooters, his expression growing concerned. "The Admiral expects results. Gentlemen," he said, "we have one more day before the delegation arrives. I suggest you both spend time studying the conditions here. This range has quirks that need to be learned." As the morning wore on, other qualified personnel arrived to attempt the shot. A Navy sniper instructor, 2 more Marine marksmen, even an Army liaison officer who claimed competition experience. Each took their turn at the firing line, and each failed to achieve the precision required. The target at 1,500 meters remained unmarked by a center hit, a silent challenge that seemed to mock their efforts. By midday, the wind had increased, making further attempts impractical. The shooters packed their equipment with frustrated efficiency, already planning their next attempts. Larkin helped break down the staging equipment, moving quietly through his assigned tasks. No one paid him any attention, this casual figure in sandals who seemed to belong more at a beach than a military range. Chief Thorne arrived to collect the equipment truck. "How'd it go?" he asked Larkin. "No confirmed hits yet," Larkin replied. "They will try again tomorrow." Thorne shook his head. "Admiral is not going to be happy. This whole demonstration was his idea, supposed to impress the foreign brass. Now it looks like we might embarrass ourselves instead." Larkin said nothing, but his mind continued working through the problem. The shot was difficult, but not impossible. Everything depended on reading the conditions correctly and making the right adjustments. Somewhere in his memory, his father's voice offered guidance. Patience, precision, and respect for the distance. Those were the keys to extreme long-range shooting. Rush any element and failure was guaranteed. The second day at Range 6 began with increased urgency. Admiral Cortland himself arrived to observe, his presence adding pressure to an already tense situation. The foreign delegation would land in less than 24 hours, and the demonstration still lacked a shooter capable of consistently hitting the target at 1,500 meters. Larkin delivered fresh equipment and supplies, his truck pulling up as the Admiral conferred with Master Chief Kellerman near the firing line. Their conversation drifted across the morning air, voices carrying in the stillness before the day's heat arrived. "This is unacceptable, Master Chief," the Admiral said, frustration evident in his tone. "We have some of the finest trained marksmen in the world on this base, and not one can make this shot. What am I supposed to tell the delegation?" "Sir, with respect, 1,500 meters is an exceptional distance," Kellerman replied. "Our people are performing well within normal parameters. Perhaps we should consider adjusting the demonstration distance." "Absolutely not. The delegation specifically requested 1,500 meters because that is what their shooter achieved. We cannot appear inferior. Find me someone who can make this shot, Master Chief. I do not care if you have to test every qualified shooter on this base." Larkin unloaded the equipment with deliberate movements, keeping his attention on his work while his mind processed what he had heard. The pressure was mounting, and desperation was beginning to influence decision-making. That was when mistakes happened, when people forced shots that required patience and precision. Senior Chief Garrison arrived for his second attempt, his jaw set with determination. He had spent the previous evening analyzing data from his first session, studying wind patterns and temperature effects. His spotter carried notebooks filled with calculations and observations. This time would be different, Garrison insisted to his team. This time the variables were understood. But understanding and execution were different challenges. Garrison's first shot came closer than any previous attempt, missing center by perhaps 3 inches. The second shot drifted wide as wind conditions shifted unexpectedly. By his 5th attempt, frustration had crept into his body language, subtle tensions that affected his form and breathing. The shots remained near misses, tantalizingly close, but never quite achieving the precision required. Gunnery Sergeant Rafferty fared no better on his second day. The Marine had brought different ammunition, hoping that ballistic variations might provide the edge he needed. His shooting was technically sound, his positions perfect, his trigger control exemplary. Yet the target remained elusive, as if the universe itself conspired against success at this particular distance. Throughout the morning, Larkin moved through his duties with quiet efficiency. He replenished supplies, adjusted equipment, and maintained a range facilities. His presence was so unremarkable that people spoke freely around him, discussing technical details and expressing frustrations without considering who might be listening. During a break between shooting sessions, Larkin found himself near a group of SEAL team members who had gathered to support Garrison. They spoke in low voices, analyzing each shot attempt and debating the factors at play. "It is the mirage," one of them said. "At this distance, even slight temperature variations create distortions that throw off the aim point." "No," another disagreed. "The issue is bullet consistency at extreme range. Even match-grade ammunition has variations that matter at 1,500 meters. One round might fly true while the next drifts 6 inches." Larkin listened and mentally cataloged their observations. They were partially correct, but missing key elements. The mirage was indeed a factor, but it could be read and compensated for with proper technique. Ammunition consistency mattered, but a skilled shooter learned to work within those variations rather than fighting against them. His thoughts drifted back to the competition circuit he had left behind. Those ranges had been filled with shooters chasing the same goal, pushing the boundaries of what was possible with rifle and skill combined. His father had been his coach and mentor, teaching him that long-range shooting was as much mental discipline as physical technique. Every shot began in the mind, with absolute clarity about the task and unwavering confidence in the execution. The championship match that had earned him national recognition had included a 1,500-meter stage. Larkin remembered the conditions that day, the pressure of competition, the awareness that his performance would define years of training and practice. He had made 5 shots at that distance, and 4 had been center hits. The 5th had been his fault, a momentary lapse in concentration that pulled the shot slightly left. But 4 out of 5 at 1,500 meters had been enough to secure first place and establish his reputation. That version of himself felt distant now, separated by years and deliberate choices. When he joined the Navy, Larkin had decided to serve in ways that did not require him to carry forward his competitive identity. The warehouse suited him, offered anonymity and purpose without the weight of expectations. His father had understood, though the old man had died before seeing where military service would take his son. By early afternoon, the shooting sessions had exhausted most of the qualified personnel willing to attempt the demonstration. Master Chief Kellerman stood with Admiral Cortlandt, reviewing lists of potential candidates who might still be tested. The conversation was subdued, both men recognizing that options were narrowing. "Sir, there is one more possibility," Kellerman said. "We have a Marine Lance Corporal who just returned from advanced sniper school. He does not have field experience yet, but his training scores were exceptional. Bring him in," the Admiral ordered. "At this point, we need to try everything." Larkin watched the young Marine arrive an hour later, his youth evident despite his professional bearing. The Lance Corporal carried standard-issue equipment and approached the firing line with visible nervousness. The pressure of the situation was clear in his movements, the awareness that senior officers were watching and judging every action. The young Marine's attempts were earnest but unsuccessful. His technique was textbook perfect, exactly as taught in sniper school, but he lacked the experience to adapt to the unique challenges of this particular range. After 6 shots without a center hit, he was thanked for his effort and dismissed. The disappointment on his face reflected the collective frustration building among all who had attempted the shot. Evening approached with the problem still unsolved. Admiral Cortland had returned to headquarters, leaving instructions that shooting attempts could continue until dark. The delegation would arrive the following morning at 1000 hours, with the demonstration scheduled for 1300 hours. Time was running out, and the base faced the very real possibility of embarrassment on an international stage. Larkin completed his final duties for the day, securing equipment and preparing the range for tomorrow's events. The target at 1500 meters stood unchanged, unmarked by any center hit despite dozens of attempts by highly qualified shooters. He found himself staring at it through binoculars, his mind automatically calculating the shot parameters. Wind was dropping as evening cooled the air. Temperature differential between ground and altitude was decreasing. Mirage effects were minimal in the failing light. These were near-ideal conditions for an extreme distance shot. Chief Thorne appeared beside him, following his gaze downrange. "You thinking about trying it yourself?" the chief asked with a slight smile. The question hung in the air between them. Larkin lowered the binoculars and turned toward the truck. "Just wondering what it takes," he replied carefully. "More than most people have," Thorne said. "I have been in the Navy 22 years, seen a lot of qualified shooters. This distance separates the very good from the exceptional. Apparently, we do not have anyone in that exceptional category on this base right now." They drove back to the warehouse in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Larkin knew he could make the shot. That knowledge sat in his chest like a physical weight, pressing against his carefully maintained anonymity. But stepping forward would mean revealing skills he had deliberately hidden, answering questions about his background, potentially changing the trajectory of his military service. The comfortable obscurity of logistics would end, replaced by expectations and attention he had worked hard to avoid. That night, in his quarters, Larkin sat with his father's old journal. The leather cover was worn smooth from years of handling, pages filled with notes about wind reading, ballistic calculations, and philosophical observations about the nature of precision shooting. His father had kept this journal throughout his competitive career, recording not just technical data, but insights about the mental discipline required at the highest levels. One entry, written after his father had achieved a particularly difficult shot, resonated in the current moment. "True skill," his father had written, "exists whether or not anyone witnesses it. But there are times when circumstances demand that we step forward, not for recognition or glory, but because we possess abilities that serve a greater purpose. Hiding our gifts when they are needed most is not humility, it is cowardice." Larkin read the passage several times, feeling the weight of his father's wisdom across the years. The old man had never pushed him in a competition, never demanded that he perform or prove himself. But he had taught that skills carried responsibility, that capability created obligation in moments when that capability was truly needed. The base was quiet as midnight passed. Larkin lay awake, running through mental rehearsals of the shot. He visualized the entire sequence, from settling into position through trigger press to bullet impact. The variables were clear in his mind. Wind would be the primary challenge, reading it correctly across 1500 meters of varied terrain. Elevation adjustment would need to account for the extreme bullet drop at that distance. Coriolis effect would push the round slightly, requiring compensation in the aim point. Temperature effects on the ammunition would influence velocity and trajectory. He had made these calculations countless times before, in competition and practice. The mathematics were second nature, embedded so deeply in his consciousness that they required no conscious effort. His body knew the positions, the breathing patterns, the trigger control. Everything was there, waiting to be applied, needing only his decision to step forward. Morning arrived with the sound of increased activity across the base. The delegation had landed early, and protocol officers were coordinating their arrival and accommodation. Master Chief Kellerman had ordered additional shooting sessions before the formal demonstration, hoping that one of the qualified personnel might finally achieve the required precision. Larkin arrived at range 6 with the first light, checking equipment and ensuring everything was positioned correctly. Senior Chief Garrison was already there, looking tired but determined. The SEAL had clearly spent a sleepless night preparing for one final attempt before the official demonstration. "This is my last chance to figure it out," Garrison said to his spotter. "After this, we go into the demonstration with whatever we have learned." Garrison's shooting that morning was the best anyone had achieved so far. His third shot struck within an inch of center, drawing excited reactions from the observers. But the follow-up shots drifted wider, and the consistency required for the demonstration remained elusive. By the time he finished, Garrison's frustration was evident despite his professional composure. Other shooters took their turns as the morning progressed. Each brought their best effort, applying everything they had learned over the previous days. The shots were all respectable, all within the capability range of trained military marksmen. But none achieved the definitive center hits that would satisfy the Admiral's requirements. At 1100 hours, Master Chief Kellerman called a halt to the practice sessions. The delegation would arrive at the range in 90 minutes, and preparations for the formal demonstration needed to begin. He gathered the shooters and explained the plan. Senior Chief Garrison would be the primary shooter, with Gunnery Sergeant Rafferty as backup. They would each make 3 attempts during the demonstration, and hopefully the pressure of the moment would produce the precision that practice had not delivered. Larkin listened from his position near the equipment area, still wearing his casual duty uniform and sandals. The internal debate continued, weighing the cost of revelation against the value of success. His father's words echoed in memory, challenging him to consider what truly mattered in this moment. The demonstration was about more than pride or international relationships. It represented the collective capability of everyone on the base, the training and dedication of the entire command structure. The delegation arrived at 12:30 hours in a convoy of black vehicles. Colonel Dmitry Volkov led the group, a distinguished officer with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He was accompanied by 4 other officers and 2 civilian advisors, all impeccably dressed despite the desert heat. Admiral Cortland met them with full military courtesy, shaking hands and exchanging diplomatic pleasantries. "Welcome to our base," Admiral Cortland said warmly. "We have prepared a demonstration that we believe will showcase the capabilities of American precision marksmanship. Our shooters have been preparing specifically for this event." Colonel Volkov smiled politely. "We are very interested to see your results. As you know, our own marksman recently achieved a confirmed hit at 1,400 meters. We are curious if your people can match or exceed that distance." The delegation was escorted to the observation area near the firing line, where chairs and shade canopies had been arranged. Master Chief Kellerman provided a briefing on the range layout and the technical specifications of the demonstration. The target at 1,500 meters was clearly visible through the spotting scopes, a steel plate mounted on a reinforced frame. Senior Chief Garrison took position first, his rifle resting on a precision bipod. His spotter settled beside him, calling initial conditions. The wind was moderate, blowing across the range from left to right at approximately 4 miles per hour. Temperature had climbed to 95 degrees, creating visible mirage effects across the desert floor. These were challenging but manageable conditions for an experienced shooter. Garrison settled into his shooting position with practiced efficiency. His breathing slowed, his body relaxed into the stock and grip. The first shot broke clean, the rifle's report echoing across the range. All eyes turned to the spotters watching through powerful optics. "Miss," one of the spotters called. Approximately 18 inches low and 6 inches left. Garrison made adjustments to his scope and fired again. The second shot was closer but still failed to connect with the target center. His third attempt clipped the edge of the steel plate, producing a faint metallic ping that carried back to the firing line. It was a hit, technically, but not the center strike that had been promised. The delegation observed politely, making notes and conferring quietly among themselves. Colonel Volkov's expression remained neutral, giving nothing away about his assessment of the performance. Gunnery Sergeant Rafferty took position for his attempts. The Marine's first shot struck high and right, the impact visible in the dust beyond the target frame. Corrections brought his second shot onto the steel plate. Another edge hit that satisfied the basic requirement but lacked the precision everyone had hoped to demonstrate. His third shot missed entirely as wind conditions shifted unexpectedly. Admiral Cortland's face had grown tight with tension. He leaned toward Master Chief Kellerman and spoke in a low voice that nonetheless carried to nearby personnel. "This is not what I promised them, Master Chief. We look unprepared and outmatched." "Sir, 1,500 meters is an extreme distance," Kellerman replied quietly. "Our people are performing within acceptable parameters given the conditions." Acceptable is not adequate. The Colonel's people achieved 1,400 meters. We promised 1,500 and cannot even deliver consistent hits. This reflects poorly on our entire command. Larkin stood near the equipment truck, watching the demonstration unfold with growing certainty about what needed to happen. The shooters were skilled and professional, but they lacked the specific experience required for this particular challenge. The shot was not impossible. It simply required someone with the right combination of training, practice, and mental discipline. The delegation was being given a tour of the equipment while the range was reset for potential additional attempts. Colonel Volkov examined one of the precision rifles with obvious expertise, discussing barrel harmonics and ballistic coefficients with technical fluency. His knowledge made it clear that he understood exactly what he was witnessing and what it meant. Admiral Cortland pulled Master Chief Kellerman aside, their conversation intense and urgent. Larkin could not hear the specific words, but the body language told the story clearly enough. The Admiral was demanding solutions, and the Master Chief had exhausted his options. Every qualified shooter on the base had attempted the shot over the past 2 days. None had demonstrated the consistency required. "Is there anyone else?" the Admiral asked, his voice rising slightly in frustration. "Anyone at all on this base who might be capable of making the shot?" Kellerman hesitated, his eyes scanning the assembled personnel. His gaze passed over Larkin without recognition, seeing only the logistics officer and Sandals who had been moving equipment and performing support duties. The Master Chief shook his head slowly. "Sir, we have tested everyone with relevant qualifications. I do not know what else to suggest." The moment stretched, time seeming to slow as Larkin felt the weight of decision pressing down on him. His father's journal entry echoed in his mind. Skills carried responsibility. Capability created obligation. Hiding gifts when they were truly needed was not humility, but something far less admirable. He took a breath and stepped forward, his sandals slapping against the concrete as he moved toward the firing line. The casual sound drew attention, heads turning to see who was approaching during this tense moment. Chief Thorne noticed first, his eyes widening in surprise. Then Master Chief Kellerman saw him, confusion crossing his face. "Petty Officer Bridger," Kellerman said sharply. "This is not the time for logistics questions. Return to your duties." Larkin stopped a respectful distance from the Admiral and Master Chief, his posture casual, but his voice clear and confident. "Sir, with your permission, I would like to attempt a shot." The words fell into stunned silence. Senior Chief Garrison turned from where he had been packing his equipment. Gunnery Sergeant Rafferty stared in disbelief. Admiral Cortland looked at Larkin as if seeing him for the first time, taking in the cargo shorts, the faded t-shirt, the sandals that seemed absurdly inappropriate for a military shooting range. "Who are you?" the Admiral asked. "Petty Officer, First Class Larkin Bridger, sir. Supply and logistics. I have been supporting the range operations for this demonstration." Admiral Cortland glanced at Master Chief Kellerman, his expression a mixture of incredulity and desperate hope. "Master Chief, do you know this sailor? Does he have any shooting qualifications?" Kellerman looked uncomfortable, clearly uncertain how to respond. "Sir, Petty Officer Bridger works in the warehouse. I am not aware of any specialized training or certifications. This seems highly irregular." Larkin met the Admiral's skeptical gaze without flinching. "Sir, I have competitive long-range shooting experience. I can make this shot." The firing line had fallen completely silent. Even the delegation had paused their conversations to observe this unexpected development. Colonel Volkov watched with obvious interest, perhaps amused by the casual American sailor who dared to interrupt a formal military demonstration. Admiral Cortland studied Larkin for a long moment, weighing desperation against military protocol. "Master Chief, does this sailor have any documented qualifications that would justify letting him attempt this shot?" Kellerman pulled out a tablet and quickly accessed personnel records. "Sir, Petty Officer Bridger's file shows no specialized weapons training beyond basic qualifications. His entire service record is logistics and supply management. There is nothing here that suggests marksmanship capability." Larkin remained calm, understanding their hesitation. "Sir, my competitive shooting was before I joined the Navy. It would not appear in my military records, but I hold a national championship in long-range precision shooting. The competition included stages at 1,500 meters." Senior Chief Garrison stepped forward, his expression doubtful. "Sir, with respect, competitive shooting and military marksmanship are very different disciplines. Even if the sailor has civilian experience, that does not mean he can perform under these conditions." "I agree with Senior Chief Garrison," Gunnery Sergeant Rafferty added. "This is highly irregular. We have trained military snipers who have been working this range for 2 days. Bringing in someone without proper credentials makes no sense." Admiral Cortland looked at the delegation, then at his own officers, then back at Larkin. The pressure of the situation was evident in every line of his face. He needed results, and conventional options had been exhausted. Sometimes desperation forced commanders to take risks that defied standard protocol. "Petty Officer Bridger," the Admiral said slowly, "if I allow you to attempt this shot and you fail, you will have wasted valuable time and embarrassed this command further. Are you absolutely certain you can succeed?" "Yes, sir," Larkin replied without hesitation. "Then get a rifle and prove it. Master Chief, set him up for one attempt. If he cannot demonstrate capability immediately, we move on to other options." Kellerman's expression showed his disapproval, but he followed orders. He gestured toward the equipment area where several precision rifles were staged. "Petty Officer Bridger, select a weapon and take position." Larkin walked to the rifle rack, his sandals drawing renewed attention with each step. Several of the elite shooters exchanged glances that mixed disbelief with contempt. This casual warehouse worker was about to attempt a shot that had defeated their best efforts. The absurdity of the situation was not lost on anyone present. He examined the available rifles with careful attention, his hands moving over each weapon with practiced familiarity. These were all excellent firearms, custom-built for precision work. He selected a rifle chambered in .300 Win Mag, a caliber he knew well from competition. The weapon felt perfectly balanced in his hands, the stock fitting naturally against his shoulder. "You cannot shoot in sandals," Master Chief Kellerman said firmly. "That is a safety violation and absolutely against range protocols." Larkin looked down at his feet, then back at the Master Chief. "Sir, I understand the concern, but changing footwear now would alter my body position and comfort level. I can shoot safely in what I am wearing." "This is completely unacceptable," Kellerman protested, turning to Admiral Cortland. "Sir, we cannot allow violations of basic range safety protocols, regardless of the circumstances." Admiral Cortland's jaw tightened. His career and reputation hung on the success of this demonstration, and he was being forced to choose between protocol and results. "Let him shoot in whatever he is wearing," the Admiral said finally. "If he fails, it will not matter what was on his feet." The decision sent a ripple of shock through the assembled personnel. Senior Chief Garrison shook his head in disbelief. Gunnery Sergeant Rafferty muttered something under his breath. The other military personnel looked on with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. This warehouse sailor in sandals was being given an opportunity they had earned through years of training and service. Colonel Volkov and the delegation moved closer to the firing line, clearly intrigued by this unexpected turn. The colonel spoke quietly to one of his advisors, pointing at Larkin's casual attire. Whatever they were discussing, their attention was now fully focused on what would happen next. Larkin moved to the firing line and settled into position. He did not rush, taking time to arrange his body and the rifle in a proper alignment. The bipod went down smoothly, the rifle sitting level and stable. His left hand found its natural position supporting the stock. His right hand wrapped around the grip with practiced ease. His cheek pressed against the stock, his eye finding the scope naturally. Master Chief Kellerman stood beside him with a spotting scope. Against his better judgment, he began calling conditions. Wind is 5 miles per hour from the left. Temperature is 96 degrees. Mirage is moderate. Target is clear at 1,500 meters. Larkin made initial adjustments to the scope, dialing in elevation to account for the extreme bullet drop. His movements were precise and confident, showing familiarity with the process that contradicted his warehouse duties. He worked through the calculations mentally, factoring in wind drift, temperature effects, and the slight Coriolis push that would affect the bullet at this distance. The range fell silent. Even the skeptics stopped their muttering, drawn into the moment despite their doubts. Everyone waited to see what this unlikely shooter would produce. The delegation watched with intense interest. Admiral Cortland stood rigid with tension. The elite shooters observed with critical eyes, ready to note every mistake. Larkin's breathing slowed, his body settling into absolute stillness. The world narrowed to the scope picture, the crosshairs, and the target 1,500 meters away. Everything else faded into background noise, irrelevant to the task at hand. This was the moment his father had prepared him for, when skill met opportunity and nothing else mattered except the execution. The crosshairs settled on the target, wavering slightly with each breath and heartbeat. Larkin observed the mirage through the scope, watching how heat distortion affected the visual picture at 1,500 meters. The shimmering air told him about wind patterns and temperature gradients that would influence the bullet's flight path. This was information that instruments could measure, but only experience could truly interpret. He made a small adjustment to the windage, adding 2 clicks to compensate for the crosswind. The elevation was already dialed to his calculated setting, accounting for the massive bullet drop that occurred at this distance. At 1,500 meters, the projectile would arc dozens of feet above the line of sight before falling back down to the target. Getting that calculation exactly right was the difference between a center hit and a complete miss. His father's voice spoke in his memory, calm and instructional. The shot begins before you touch the trigger. Everything must be perfect in the setup. The position, the natural point of aim, the breathing rhythm, the mental clarity. Only when all elements align do you allow the shot to break. Larkin checked his natural point of aim, ensuring the rifle wanted to rest exactly where he needed it. Any fighting or muscling the weapon into position would introduce tension and error. The rifle settled naturally on target, requiring no correction or adjustment. His breathing established a slow, controlled rhythm. For seconds in, hold. For seconds out, natural pause. The shot would break during that natural pause, when his body was most stable. The scope picture cleared as his eye and brain synchronized perfectly. At 1,500 meters, the target appeared small even through high magnification optics. But Larkin had trained at these distances, learned to trust the scope's resolution and his own ability to hold the precise aim point required. The steel plate filled his vision, the center marked by a small orange that provided the exact point of aim. Master Chief Kellerman continued calling conditions, his voice professional despite his evident skepticism. Wind is holding steady at 5 miles per hour. No significant changes in the past 30 seconds. Mirage indicates temperature is stable. You have good conditions for the shot. Larkin acknowledged the information without speaking, his focus absolute. The trigger came back to its first stage, removing slack from the mechanism. This was a 2-stage trigger, common in precision rifles. The first stage was travel. The second stage was the actual break with a firing pin released. He settled his finger on that second stage, feeling the exact pressure required to fire the weapon. Senior Chief Garrison watched from behind the firing line, his arms crossed and expression doubtful. He had spent 2 days working this range, firing dozens of rounds, applying everything he knew about long-range shooting. Now, this logistics officer in Sandals was attempting the same shot with apparent confidence. Part of Garrison wanted to see him succeed, if only to salvage the demonstration. But a larger part resented the implication that someone without formal military sniper training could accomplish what he could not. Gunnery Sergeant Rafferty stood nearby, equally skeptical. The Marine had noticed small details in Larkin's setup that suggested genuine experience. The way he positioned his body, the manner in which he settled the rifle, the deliberate approach to his breathing pattern. These were not the actions of someone unfamiliar with precision shooting. But experience on a competition range was vastly different from performing under the pressure of international observation with command careers hanging in the balance. Colonel Volkov leaned toward Admiral Cortlandt and spoke in accented but clear English. This sailor, he is either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both. It will be interesting to see which. The Admiral did not respond, his jaw clenched tight with tension. Everything had come down to this single moment, this unlikely shooter in inappropriate footwear attempting a shot that military professionals had failed to achieve. If Larkin succeeded, the demonstration would be salvaged and the command's reputation preserved. If he failed, the embarrassment would only be compounded by the irregular decision to let him try. Larkin's world had contracted to a single point of focus. The crosshairs rested precisely on the center of the target, moving only slightly with his natural body movement. He was not trying to hold perfectly still. That was impossible and counterproductive. Instead, he was timing the shot to break during the optimal moment in his natural oscillation, when the crosshairs passed through the exact aim point. His finger increased pressure on the trigger incrementally, so slowly that the exact moment of firing would be almost subconscious. This was the paradox of precision shooting, that the final break had to be somewhat surprising even to the shooter. Anticipating the shot introduced tension and movement that threw off accuracy. The trigger had to break naturally, almost by itself, as the culmination of perfect preparation. The rifle recoiled smoothly, pushing straight back into his shoulder. The scope picture jumped slightly, but Larkin maintained his position, following through after the shot as he had been taught. The report echoed across the range, sharp and authoritative. The brass case ejected cleanly, landing in the dust beside him. The entire sequence had taken perhaps 2 seconds from final trigger pressure to complete recoil cycle. Every eye turned downrange toward the spotters positioned with high-power optics. Master Chief Kellerman pressed his face against his spotting scope, searching for the bullet impact. The seconds stretched impossibly long as everyone waited for confirmation. At 1,500 meters, even with powerful optics, it took a moment to verify the exact hit location. The silence on the firing line was absolute, broken only by the slight wind moving across the desert and the faint sound of Larkin's controlled breathing as he remained in position, waiting. Master Chief Kellerman's voice broke the silence, carrying across the range with unmistakable surprise. Center hit. Dead center on the plate. The words seemed to take a moment to register. Then the firing line erupted in reactions. Some personnel stepped forward for better views through binoculars. Others simply stared in disbelief. Senior Chief Garrison's expression shifted from skepticism to stunned acknowledgement. Gunnery Sergeant Rafferty shook his head slowly, processing what had just occurred. Admiral Cortlandt moved to a spotting scope and verified the hit himself. The bullet had struck the orange center with precision that seemed almost impossible given the distance. At 1,500 meters, achieving that level of accuracy required not just skill, but an understanding of ballistics and environmental factors that few shooters ever developed. The Admiral straightened from the scope, his face showing a complex mixture of relief and confusion. Petty Officer Bridger, the Admiral said carefully, "That was an exceptional shot. Can you repeat it?" Larkin remained in position, his body still settled into the rifle. "Yes, sir," he replied calmly. "Would you like me to demonstrate consistency?" The Admiral glanced at Colonel Volkov and the delegation, who were conferring quietly among themselves with obvious interest. "Yes," the Admiral said. "I want to see if that was skill or luck. Make the shot again." Larkin cycled the bolt, chambering a fresh round. He went through his setup sequence again, checking natural point of aim and confirming scope settings. The process was methodical and unhurried, showing no indication of stress or uncertainty. Master Chief Kellerman called wind conditions, noting that environmental factors had remained stable since the first shot. The second shot broke with the same smooth precision as the first. The rifle recoiled, the brass ejected, and once again all eyes turned downrange. Kellerman was faster with his confirmation this time, his voice carrying a note of genuine amazement. Center hit again, maybe 1 inch from the first impact point. Now the reactions were more pronounced. Personnel who had been skeptical began moving closer, wanting better views of this unexpected demonstration. The delegation members spoke among themselves with animated gestures, their body language indicating they were impressed by what they were witnessing. Colonel Volkov stepped forward, requesting permission to view through a spotting scope himself. The Russian officer spent a long moment examining the target, then straightened with a slight smile. 2 consecutive center hits at 1,500 meters is very impressive, he said to Admiral Cortland. Your logistics officer shoots better than your snipers. The comment was not intended as an insult, but rather an observation of fact. Admiral Cortland's jaw tightened slightly, aware of the implications. "Sir," he said to Colonel Volkov, "this sailor has specialized background that was not initially apparent. He will be representing our marksmanship capability for the remainder of the demonstration." Master Chief Kellerman approached Larkin, who had remained in shooting position. "Petty Officer Bridger, where exactly did you receive this training? Your service record shows nothing about advanced marksmanship schools or specialized courses." Larkin finally rose from the prone position, standing and stretching muscles that had been held tensely during the shots. "Sir, I competed in civilian long-range shooting before joining the Navy. National-level competition. My father was a competitive shooter and coached me through most of my training." Senior Chief Garrison stepped closer, his professional interest overcoming his earlier skepticism. "What distances did you compete at?" he asked. "Everything from 300 to 1,800 meters, Larkin replied. "The national championship included multiple stages at 1,500 meters. That distance is familiar territory for me." "Why did you not mention this capability when we were looking for shooters?" Garrison asked with obvious frustration. "We spent 2 days testing people while you were moving equipment and saying nothing." Larkin met the SEAL's gaze calmly. "I did not join the Navy to be a shooter, Senior Chief. I chose logistics because I wanted to serve in a support capacity. My competitive background is not something I advertise. But you just demonstrated capability that could have saved us considerable time and embarrassment," Admiral Cortland interjected. "Why volunteer now and not earlier?" The question hung in the air while Larkin considered his response. "Sir, I only stepped forward when it became clear that the demonstration was in jeopardy. My personal preferences about how I serve are less important than the needs of the command." The answer seemed to satisfy the Admiral, who nodded slowly. "Well, your timing is fortunate even if your discretion was excessive. Master Chief, adjust the demonstration plan. Petty Officer Bridger will be our primary shooter. I want him to make multiple attempts to show consistency." Colonel Volkov raised a hand politely. "Admiral Cortland, if I may suggest something. Your logistics officer has made 2 perfect shots. Perhaps he could attempt an even greater distance. Our marksman achieved 1,400 meters. You promised 1,500, and your sailor has delivered that. What about 1,600 meters or 1,800? Let us see the true limits of his capability." The suggestion created an immediate tension. Attempting greater distances would either prove American superiority definitively or risk failure after success had been achieved. Admiral Cortland looked at Larkin, the question evident in his expression. "Sir," Larkin said calmly, I am willing to attempt whatever distance you request. 1,800 meters is within my experience range from competition. Gunnery Sergeant Rafferty stepped forward. Sir, with respect, 1,800 meters pushes into the realm of extreme long range. Very few shooters in the world can consistently hit targets at that distance. Even with perfect conditions, we're talking about a bullet flight time of nearly 3 seconds and drop measured in dozens of feet. Which is precisely why it would be impressive if your sailor can do it, Colonel Volkov said with a slight smile. Unless you fear the attempt will fail and diminish what has already been accomplished. Admiral Cortland recognized the challenge in Colonel Volkov's words. Declining would suggest doubt in American capabilities, while accepting risk turning success into failure. But the Admiral had not reached his position by avoiding calculated risks. Very well, he said. We will attempt 1,800 meters. Master Chief, coordinate with range personnel to set up a target at that distance. The firing line became a flurry of activity. Range technicians drove out in vehicles to position a new target frame at 1,800 meters, nearly a mile beyond the original demonstration distance. The journey took 20 minutes, giving the delegation time to observe the expansive range and discuss the upcoming attempt among themselves. Larkin used the time to study conditions and prepare mentally. 1,800 meters was significantly more challenging than 1,500. The bullet would be in flight for nearly 3 seconds, crossing terrain with varying wind patterns and temperature zones. Every small error in calculation would be magnified exponentially at that distance. He had made successful shots at 1,800 meters in competition, but never under these circumstances, with international observers and military careers hanging in the balance. Senior Chief Garrison approached him during the setup period. You really think you can make this shot? The SEAL asked quietly. I have done it before, Larkin replied. Competition conditions, but the principles are the same. Garrison studied him for a moment. I spent 15 years developing my shooting skills. Served in combat zones, trained at advanced schools, worked with the best instructors the military has. And you just walked up in sandals and made it look easy. That is hard to process. Larkin understood the frustration in the other man's voice. It was not anger, but rather the confusion that came from having assumptions challenged. I do not mean any disrespect to you or your training, Senior Chief. You are an exceptional shooter. This just happens to be something I have specialized in since I was young. We all have different strengths. The SEAL nodded slowly. Well, I hope your strength holds for another 300 meters. Because if you pull this off, you're going to become very famous very quickly on this base. The target frame was finally positioned and confirmed at 1,800 meters. The steel plate was larger than the previous target, accounting for the increased difficulty. Even so, hitting it would require precision that bordered on the limits of what was possible with conventional rifle and ammunition. Admiral Cortland gathered everyone near the firing line. Petty Officer Bridger will now attempt a shot at 1,800 meters, he announced formally. This exceeds the original demonstration parameters, but will showcase the full capabilities of American military marksmanship. Colonel Volkov, we appreciate your suggestion to raise the bar. The Russian officer inclined his head graciously. I look forward to seeing what your sailor can accomplish. Larkin returned to the firing line and settled back into position. The rifle felt familiar now, an extension of his body and intention. He looked through the scope at the distant target, so far away that atmospheric conditions created significant visual distortion. Reading the mirage at this distance required experience and intuition developed over hundreds of similar shots. Master Chief Kellerman took his position as spotter, though his earlier skepticism had transformed into cautious optimism. Wind at the firing line is 4 miles per hour from the left, he called. Temperature is 97 degrees. Target is clear, but mirage is heavy. Estimated wind downrange is 6 to 7 miles per hour based on vegetation movement. Larkin absorbed the information and began his calculations. The bullet would drop approximately 120 feet from bore line to target at 1,800 meters. Wind drift would push the projectile several feet off course, if not properly compensated. Coriolis effect became more significant at this distance, requiring additional windage adjustment. Air density, humidity, even barometric pressure all factored into the complex equation. His father had taught him that extreme long-range shooting was as much art as science. The mathematics provided a starting point, but final adjustments came from reading environmental cues that no instrument could fully capture. The way grass moved at different distances indicated wind layers. The quality of mirage revealed temperature gradients. Even the clarity of the air itself told stories about conditions affecting bullet flight. He made his scope adjustments deliberately, adding significant elevation to account for the massive drop and adjusting windage for the estimated drift. The numbers felt right, confirmation coming from years of experience rather than conscious calculation. This was the zone his father had described, where conscious thought gave way to trained instinct and the shot became almost inevitable. The delegation had grown quiet, sensing that something significant was about to occur. Even skeptics among the military personnel found themselves hoping for success rather than failure. National pride had become invested in this moment, in this unlikely sailor who had stepped forward when needed. Larkin's breathing established its rhythm, slow and controlled. His heart rate dropped as his body entered the focused state that competition had trained into him. The crosshairs settled on the distant target, wavering slightly, but returning always to the same point. His finger found the trigger, taking up the slack and settling on the breaking point. The world narrowed to the scope picture. Background sounds faded into insignificance. Time seemed to stretch, each second expanding into multiple heartbeats. This was the moment before, the perfect instant when everything aligned and the shot waited only for final release. The trigger broke with smooth precision. The rifle recoiled into his shoulder. The report echoed across the range. The brass case ejected and fell to the dust. Larkin maintained his position, following through as the bullet began its 3-second journey across 1,800 meters of desert air. Through the scope, he could see nothing of the bullet's flight. At these distances, projectiles were invisible even to the shooter. Everything depended on the spotters downrange with their powerful optics, watching for impact and ready to call the result. The seconds stretched impossibly long. 3 seconds felt like minutes as everyone waited. Master Chief Kellerman pressed his face against his spotting scope, tracking the target area with intense focus. Other spotters did the same, multiple sets of eyes searching for confirmation. Then Kellerman's voice cut through the tension, carrying across the silent range with unmistakable triumph. Center hit. Perfect center strike at 1,800 meters. The firing line erupted in spontaneous applause. Military personnel who moments before had been skeptical now clapped and cheered with genuine enthusiasm. The delegation joined in, Colonel Volkov nodding with obvious appreciation while his advisors spoke rapidly among themselves in their native language. Admiral Cortland's face showed pure relief mixed with pride, the tension finally draining from his shoulders. Larkin rose from his shooting position, safing the rifle and setting it carefully on its bipod. He remained calm despite the reaction around him, his expression showing neither pride nor false modesty. This was simply what he had trained to do, what his father had prepared him for through countless hours on ranges across the country. The applause felt strange after years of deliberate anonymity, but he accepted it with quiet grace. Colonel Volkov approached and extended his hand. "That was exceptional shooting, young man. I have seen many military marksmen, trained by the best instructors in the world, and very few could make that shot under any conditions. You have a rare gift." "Thank you, sir," Larkin replied, shaking the colonel's hand. "I have been fortunate to receive excellent training." "Your father," the colonel said perceptively. "He taught you this skill." "Yes, sir. He was a competitive shooter for many years. He believed that precision shooting was a discipline that taught patience and respect for the craft. He taught you well." The colonel glanced at Admiral Cortland. "Admiral, you have hidden talent on your base. Perhaps you should reconsider how this sailor is being utilized." Admiral Cortland stepped forward, his command presence reasserting itself now that the immediate crisis had passed. Petty Officer Bridger, your performance today has been nothing short of remarkable. I think we need to have a conversation about your future assignments. Skills like yours should not be wasted in a warehouse. Sir, with respect, Larkin said carefully. I chose logistics because I wanted to serve in a support capacity. I have no desire to pursue sniper training or combat roles. What I did today was to help the command, not to change my career path. The Admiral's expression showed surprise at this response. You just demonstrated capability that rivals the best shooters in the military, and you want to continue counting supplies in a warehouse. That makes no sense, Petty Officer. It makes sense to me, sir, Larkin replied. My father competed his entire life, always chasing the next championship, the next record. He loved it, but he also missed other things because of that focus. I decided I wanted to serve my country in ways that allowed me to have a more balanced life. Today was necessary, but it does not change what I want for my career. Senior Chief Garrison had been listening to this exchange with fascination. You're seriously going to go back to the warehouse after this? He asked. Everyone on base is going to know your name by tomorrow. You could write your own ticket for advanced training, special operations support, anything you wanted. Larkin shrugged slightly. Fame does not interest me, Senior Chief. Neither does the pressure that comes with being known as an exceptional shooter. I prefer the quiet work, the routine. It suits who I am. Gunnery Sergeant Rafferty shook his head in disbelief. I have never met anyone who would turn down recognition like this. Most people spend their careers trying to prove they are the best at something. You prove it and then want to hide again. Not hiding, Larkin said. Just choosing what matters to me. My father used to say that true mastery required no audience. The shot is what matters, not who sees it or what recognition comes from it. Master Chief Kellerman had been quiet during these exchanges, processing the implications of what had occurred. Petty Officer Bridger, regardless of your preferences, this base now knows you have exceptional capability. That knowledge creates expectations. You may find it difficult to maintain the anonymity you prefer. I understand, sir, Larkin acknowledged. But I hope people will respect my wishes about my career. I stepped forward today because it was needed. That does not mean I want to be called upon every time someone needs an expert shooter. The delegation began their departure, clearly satisfied with what they had witnessed. Colonel Volkov paused to speak with Admiral Cortland one final time. Admiral, this demonstration exceeded my expectations. Your logistics officer has shown that American military personnel possess remarkable individual capabilities. I will report very favorably about what I witnessed here today. After the delegation left, the range began to clear. The target frames were recovered, the equipment packed, the firing line returned to its normal state. Personnel continued to approach Larkin, offering congratulations and asking questions about his background. He answered politely but briefly, uncomfortable with the attention, yet understanding that it was unavoidable. Chief Thorne arrived to collect the equipment truck and found Larkin helping load gear. The chief's expression showed a mixture of pride and concern. You know, your life on this base just changed completely, right? He said quietly. I hope not, Larkin replied. I just want to go back to work tomorrow like today never happened. Thorne laughed without humor. That is not going to be possible. You just became a legend. The story of the logistics officer in Sandals who outshot the SEALs and Marines will be told and retold until it becomes mythology. You might as well accept it. As evening approached, Larkin returned to his quarters. The photograph of his father still sat on the simple shelf, the two of them with their rifles and trophy. He studied the image in the fading light, thinking about legacy and choice, about skill and purpose, about the balance between capability and contentment. His father had lived for competition, had defined himself through shooting excellence. Larkin had chosen a different path, one that allowed him to use his skills when needed, but not be defined by them. Today had been necessary, a moment when duty required him to step forward. But it did not change his fundamental belief that true mastery required no constant validation. The base was quieter now, the day's drama fading into routine evening activities. Larkin sat in the stillness and felt satisfied with his choices. He had helped when needed, demonstrated capability when required, and now he would return to the life he had deliberately chosen. The warehouse would be there tomorrow, with its inventory lists and supply orders, its comfortable anonymity and purposeful routine. Whether others understood his decision did not matter. His father would have understood. True skill existed independent of recognition, and service came in many forms. Sometimes the greatest strength was knowing when to step forward and when to step back, when to shine and when to fade into the background. Today he had done both, and that balance felt exactly right. The following morning arrived with unexpected changes. Larkin walked to the warehouse as usual, his sandals making their familiar slapping sound against the concrete. But the anonymity he had carefully maintained was gone. Personnel he passed offered greetings and congratulations. Some stopped to shake his hand. Others simply stared with obvious curiosity, wanting to see the sailor who had made the impossible shot. Chief Thorne met him at the warehouse entrance with a knowing smile. "Morning, legend," the chief said. "How does it feel to be famous?" "Uncomfortable," Larkin replied honestly. "I just want to do my job." "Well, you might want to adjust your expectations. The Admiral wants to see you at 0900. Something about a formal commendation and discussion of your future role on the base." Larkin sighed, but nodded acceptance. He spent the next hour completing his normal duties, checking inventory and processing requisitions. The familiar routine provided comfort despite the changes swirling around him. Whatever happened in the Admiral's office, he would maintain his preference for simple, purposeful work. At the appointed time, he reported to headquarters. Admiral Cortland's office was impressive, with polished wood furniture and walls covered in military memorabilia. The Admiral sat behind his desk, Master Chief Kellerman standing nearby. Both men rose when Larkin entered. "Petty Officer Bridger," the Admiral began, "I have spent considerable time thinking about yesterday's demonstration. Your performance saved this command from significant embarrassment and strengthened our relationship with an important allied nation. That deserves recognition." The Admiral opened a folder on his desk. "I am awarding you a Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal for your exceptional performance. Additionally, I am recommending you for advanced training opportunities that would utilize your marksmanship skills more effectively than warehouse duties." "Sir," Larkin said carefully, "I appreciate the recognition, but as I mentioned yesterday, I prefer to remain in logistics. My shooting ability is something I can offer when needed, but I do not want it to define my service." Admiral Cortland studied him for a long moment. "I respect your position, Petty Officer, but I also have to consider the needs of this command. Having discovered your capability, it would be irresponsible to ignore it. However, I am willing to compromise." The Admiral leaned forward. "You will remain in your logistics position as your primary duty. However, you will also be designated as a marksmanship consultant for the base. When we need expertise for demonstrations, training, or evaluation of long-range shooting programs, you will be called upon. Does that seem reasonable?" Larkin considered the proposal. It allowed him to maintain his preferred role while acknowledging that his skills had become known. The compromise respected his wishes while serving the command's interests. "Yes, sir," he said. "That seems reasonable." Master Chief Kellerman spoke for the first time. "Petty Officer Bridger, I owe you an apology. When you volunteered yesterday, I dismissed you based on appearance and assignment rather than capability. That was wrong, and I regret it." "No apology necessary, sir," Larkin replied. "My presentation and record gave you no reason to think otherwise. I deliberately maintained a low profile." After the meeting concluded, Larkin returned to the warehouse. The day progressed with normal duties, though personnel continued to approach with questions and congratulations. By afternoon, he had grown more comfortable with the attention, accepting that his life on base had changed despite his preferences. Senior Chief Garrison appeared at the warehouse near closing time. The SEAL carried 2 cups of coffee and gestured toward a quiet corner. "Got a minute?" he asked. They sat on equipment crates, sipping coffee in companionable silence for a moment. Finally, Garrison spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about your father and choosing your own path. It made me realize something about myself. Larkin waited, sensing the SEAL had more to say. I have spent my career trying to be the best at everything, Garrison continued. Best shooter, best operator, best leader. Always competing, always proving myself. Yesterday, when you made those shots, my first reaction was resentment. Then I realized that was my ego talking, not my professionalism. You are an exceptional shooter, Senior Chief, Larkin said. What I did yesterday does not diminish that. No, but it taught me something about perspective. You have elite capability, but choose not to build your identity around it. That takes a different kind of strength than what I have been pursuing. Maybe there is wisdom in knowing when to shine and when to simply serve. The conversation continued as evening approached, two shooters from different backgrounds finding common ground in mutual respect. Garrison eventually departed with a final handshake, leaving Larkin to close down the warehouse for the night. As the sun set across the base, Larkin completed his final checks and locked the warehouse doors. The day had been extraordinary in many ways, but he had maintained his essential nature throughout. Tomorrow would bring more attention, more questions, perhaps more requests for demonstrations of his skills. But he had established boundaries and found a balance that honored both his capabilities and his preferences. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let us know your favorite moment, or if you have ever witnessed someone with hidden skill surprise everyone around them. Walking back to his quarters, Larkin passed the range where yesterday's demonstration had occurred. The target frames had been removed. The firing line returned to normal. In a few days, other shooters would use that range for training and qualification. The 1,800-meter shot would become part of base lore, told and retold until the details blurred into legend. But for Larkin, it was simply a moment when duty required him to use skills he possessed. His father's photograph waited in his quarters, a reminder of legacy and choice. The old man had pursued excellence with single-minded dedication. Larkin had chosen to serve with quiet competence, stepping forward when needed, but never seeking the spotlight. Both paths had value. Both represented valid approaches to mastery and service. The warehouse would be there tomorrow, with its inventory and routine. His sandals would continue to slap against concrete as he moved through familiar duties. And if called upon again, he would step forward and do what was necessary, then return to the life he had deliberately chosen. The base settled into evening routine, lights coming on across buildings and streets. Somewhere officers were planning training exercises. Somewhere enlisted personnel were relaxing after duty. Somewhere new sailors were learning what it meant to serve. And in the warehouse district, a logistics officer walked home in sandals, content with choices made and skills revealed only when truly needed. The balance felt right, honor satisfied, duty fulfilled, and life continuing with purposeful simplicity.